and welcome to Tech presented by KaiZen, where we will explore common cleaning questions and answers. Let's get started. I would like to introduce KaiZen's own Carolyn Leary.
Thanks, William. As William said, my name is Carolyn Leary. I'm the analytical lab manager and the safety data sheet coordinator here at KaiZen Corporation. And today we're going to finish up with part 5 of our understanding SDSs. Uh, we've looked at, up till now, uh, sections 1 through 9, but today we're going to finish up with the last sections 10 through 16. Just a quick recap from previous parts 1 through 4. A GHS safety data sheet, it's a relatively brief document that follows a well-defined format outlining the hazards of a chemical and provides guidelines on the proper handling, storage, and shipping of that material. The GHS guideline also provides very specific and consistent procedures to determine the types of hazards in a chemical or a mixture, their level of severity, and how it should be reported in an SDS. Now, we've talked about before that a GHS safety data sheet has 16 sections, and parts 1 through 4 have covered the information contained in the first 9 sections. If you go back to KaiZen's Tech to Tech YouTube channel, you can review these and get more information on these sections. But today, we're going to talk about sections 10 through 16, the stability and reactivity. Section 11 is the toxicological information. Section 12 is ecological information. Section 13 is disposal consideration. Section 14 is transport information. Section 15 is regulatory information, and Section 16 is other information. Now, Section 10, stability and reactivity, it describes the stability of that chemical and if there's under certain conditions where there's a possibility of a hazardous reaction. Um, Also, it should include if there's any hazards that might be associated if it's released into the environment. Here you have information on its reactivity, the chemical stability, the possibility of hazardous reactions, the conditions to avoid to prevent those. Are there any incompatibilities with other materials? And after use and as the product decomposes, are there any known hazards? Now, one thing you should find, and this is true for sections 10 through 16, is there may be a lot of overlap with information provided in the previous sections. For example, this section 10 talks about stability and reactivity, and that was touched on in the section talking about storage conditions and how to properly handle the material. So that's one thing to be aware of is look for and make sure that there's consistency within the safety data sheet between the different sections. Section 11 provides toxicological information, and while this is generally meant for the use of medical professionals or occupational health, safety, and toxicologists, here you're going to find more complete information on a description of the toxicological effects of exposure to the chemical or the mixture um, discussed in this document. Section 11 breaks down toxicological information into looking at many of the specific GHS hazard classes, such as serious eye damage, carcinogenicity, reproductive toxicity. Here, if there's information or test results that have been determined by testing, they'll be provided here and dosage levels and information along those lines. Other hazards that may not be reported elsewhere can be included here, such as if there are results of testing, toxicology tests that could be helpful in case of exposure. Those can be included in Section 11 here. Section 12 talks about ecological information and helps evaluate the impact to the environment in case of a spill. This section provides toxicity information for specific organisms, such as algae or fish, talks about its persistence and its degradability in the environment. Does it have the potential to accumulate? Is it mobile in soil? Could it pass from the soil into groundwater? Things of that nature. Are there any assessments that are relevant with exposure to this material? Are there any endocrine disrupting properties or other adverse effects, such as ozone depletion levels and global warming potential? Section 13 provides information on disposal of the product or waste treatment. It should include information for disposing, recycling, or reclaiming the material if that's known. Point out any physical properties that might affect its disposal. Flammability would be one. Toxicity would be another. Are there specific landfill or incineration considerations that you should know? And it's important to remember that ultimately, the user, you're responsible to comply with your local or national regulations. This is just information to help you make those decisions more appropriately. Section 14 is transportation information. And this is very basic information on the proper shipping of the product. All shipping has to be consistent with already in place international agreements and regulations that govern shipping the materials by land, sea, air, or rail. The information in this section has to be consistent with determining the UN number. Those are those 4 digits you see on the sides of rail cars or uh, semi trucks. Provides the proper shipping name and hazard class, packing group, environmental hazards. Does this material, is it a marine pollutant or does it contain a marine pollutant? And are there special precautions for the user and any information relative to transporting this in cargo by according to the IMO instructions? And section 15 is regulatory information. This section provides additional information that's not been provided elsewhere in the safety data sheet. In here, you may find um, cell safety, health, and environmental regulations or legislations that are specific to your product or the mixture, but were not included in the other sections. If there's been a national or a regional regulatory list that hasn't been covered, it would be listed here. Any lists or prohibitions that the product itself or components of it may be found on could be found here. And these are things like California's Prop 65 chemicals, or is the product or component subject to the Montreal Protocol, or does it contain hazardous air pollutants or HAPs? And then section 15.2, have any chemical safety assessments been done? And if so, the data could be reported here. And lastly, section 16 is other information. And this is just kind of rounds out information on the revision date, on the revision number. It also should tell you where changes were made in this document versus previous revisions. It could be done within the body of the document. Sometimes there'll be a little mark just noting that this section changed from the previous revision. Or it can be listed here at the end. Definitions for abbreviation or acronyms used can be provided here, and any references that were used in the preparation of the document can be found here. So now if we go on just to kind of recap and look at an example of a finished document, going back to our previous, we made up our KaiZen's new cleaner and put together a safety data sheet. And rather than go through again sections 1 through 9 for examples of those, again, refer back to KaiZen's Tech to Tech series, parts 1 through 4, and you can get more information on that. Just looking at section 10, the stability and reactivity, fortunately, our new cleaner is very stable and non-reactive. But again, as we said before, We can't just not include some of these subsections, like section 10.1, reactivity. There's no further information available. We can't just ignore it. We have to include it and just include a statement that says either there's no information available or it's not reactive. You can see that this product doesn't have any conditions we need to avoid or no known hazardous decomposition products, things of that nature. Section 11 has toxicological information. In our product, there's one component that has some information on exposure levels, both if taken orally or if it absorbs through the skin, and that information is provided here. Section 12 is ecological information. And again, we're not omitting any of the sections they require, but either they're not applicable or they don't have the information. If our product did have known toxicities to the environment, they would be included here under the appropriate section. Section 13, we provide waste treatment information, saying that it should not be provided or disposed of with common household garbage and not to dispose of the product through the sewage system. And again, we note disposal should be made according to official regulations. Section 14 is our transportation section. This material is not transported, but you can see that we've discussed the UN number, its shipping name, and included the other subsections for proper transportation. And Section 15 is regulatory information. And here again, we talked about it has to be relevant to the country where the product is being used. And I'm showing an example of some of the other regulatory information that could be found and how it will change based on the country of use. In the United States, you can see our Prop 65, we the EPA information. There's several more lists that are addressed in a US safety data sheet versus say one for Belgium. We have a subsidiary there, and its section 15 has regulatory information relative to some UN and EU directives, and that information um, is provided here, and that none of our ingredients in our material are on these lists. And lastly, section 16 has other information. We provide a disclaimer and uh, information on the revision. There's a list you'll see of abbreviations and acronyms, and it talks about in our document, changes from a previous revision are noted by an asterisk at the section where that change was made. Now I'd like to answer some questions that we get on these topics. Um, the first one is, I just got a revised SDS for a product I've been using for years. Why is the new version so different from the old one? This can happen very commonly. Sometimes safety data sheet will look different because there's new research data or scientific data that changes the classification of the material. So that'll be reflected there. Also, what can happen is that as the GHS guidelines are updated and a country may adopt the newer regulations, that'll cause different information to be displayed um, and the difference you're seeing from an old version to the new revised version. Next, I received an SDS that was written 5 years ago. Can I trust that it is accurate? It's always best practice to get the most current revision of a product. But when I was doing research on this question, I'm not finding a consistent date for when safety data sheets need to be revised. It's very well documented that if, for example, like our question one, if a chemical or if your product has had a new classification, that should be disclosed in safety data sheets revised within 90 days. But if the product hasn't changed, the length of time between revisions can vary. So it's possible that if the company is offering you this safety data sheet and they tell you that that's the most revised version, that they're confident that it's still accurate. Fortunately, we have to rely on the provider um, for that document. And lastly, with GHS, our safety data sheets the same for the same product, the same in every country. And we've talked about this before, and that not necessarily true. Each country has the ability to adopt which parts of GHS that they want to incorporate into their national hazard communication program. And so, therefore, it can be slightly different from country to country. And as you saw in my example for Section 15, the information provided can be different. So, it's always important to get the safety data sheet for the product for where you will be using that product.
Thanks, Carolyn. And thank you all for watching this Tech to Tech session. If you would like to discuss this topic further or have any questions not answered in this session, please contact your local Kaizen regional manager or send an email to tech@kaizen.com, and we will have someone follow up with you as soon as possible. Do you want to have exclusive access to future content sent directly to your inbox, or do you know someone who would benefit from these sessions? The answer is yes. Just go to tech2tech.kaizen.com and fill out the subscription form. And if you like this video, be sure to follow us on our social media platforms for more expert cleaning content.